Welcome to Phrase by Phrase, where we study the Bible one phrase at a time in 5-minute chunks. And today we're going to be looking at James chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. And it starts out this way in verse 3: knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Now remember, James had said in verse 2, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, right? We looked at that, and now he's saying, here's why: knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. When James says that trials test our faith, he means that trials exercise or they refine our faith. I mean, there is nothing like a trial to push your faith, but it's necessary because exercise produces endurance. See, think of it this way: a strong faith isn't simply a faith that can believe for big things. That's really the easy part of faith, to just be able to believe that God can do the impossible, to believe that God can work a miracle. You know, that's fine, but rather a strong faith, the harder thing, is a faith that holds on. A faith that endures and presses and doesn't give up. That's the more difficult thing. I mean, remember Jesus, when he prayed for Peter, he had told Peter that he was going to be sifted like wheat by the devil. This is when he was predicting that season when Peter denied the Lord. And he said this word to Peter. He said, Peter, I have prayed for you that your faith will fail not. And Peter had that time when he rejected the Lord, he denied the Lord, he went away back to Galilee to go fishing, and Jesus sought him out after his resurrection. And Peter was restored, and his faith did not completely fail. It endured through that process, which set Peter up to be ready to face the things that he had to face in his life. It was a huge trial, a sifting that Jesus allowed because it strengthened Peter to prepare him for the stuff that he was going to have to face later. And he would face it for the purpose of seeing many souls come to faith in Jesus Christ. So it's a faith that holds on. It's a faith that endures. And here's notice the word produces. The testing of your faith produces endurance. It's in the present tense, so it's a process that's in view here. So this is not, an instant accomplishment, and that's why there will be various trials in our lives, because endurance is a process, and it takes many different kinds of trials to help work that out in our lives. But here's the reason that God allows trials into our lives. In verse 4, he says, but let endurance have its perfect result, so that... So the phrase "so that" is pointing us to the result of this, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So he's talking about perfection, he's talking about completion, he's talking about lacking in nothing. Now that does not mean that you're going to be, and that I'm going to be, some kind of a perfect Christian with no flaws. That's not what he's talking about here. The complete work that James is talking about is the formation of Christ in us. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 19, the Apostle Paul wrote these words. He said, my children, with whom I am again in labor, and then listen to this, until Christ is formed in you. That's the goal, that Christ's life would be manifested in and through our lives. The sum goal of following Jesus is that the life of Christ would be formed in us, and he would express his life through us. And that's what he wants to do. But the question is, why is that so important that it's worth going through trials? Because we have to go through trials in order for that life to be manifested through us. So why is that so important? Well, I shared with you at the beginning of the study that the whole outline of the book of James is that he's listing out marks of an authentic faith. And we saw there's 10 of them. 10 marks that show that our faith is real. Well, the formation of Christ in us makes it possible to live out the 10 marks of an authentic faith. And that happens through the crucible of life. And it takes time, and it takes endurance. That's why he says, let endurance have its perfect result. Endurance under trial does something that nothing else can do. So here's some questions I want to ask, some things for you to think about as you're chewing on those ideas. The first one is this: if you are currently facing a trial, how do you think Jesus would respond if he were in your situation? How would Jesus face this trial that you're going through? Here's the second question. In thinking about how Jesus would respond, what Christ-like characteristics can you identify? What about Christ makes him unique in the way you think he would respond? And then 3, in addition to praying for deliverance from the trial or strength to get through the trial, consider praying for those Christ-like character traits to be formed in you. Well, God bless you. You think about that.